When the dawn light first struck the dusty plain outside Talavera de la Reine, Corporal Edward Markham of the 48th Foot awoke to a world on the edge of ruin. The air was already hot, dry, sharp, the kind of heat that smells of iron and death. In the distance, French drums rolled like thunder trapped beneath the horizon. British tents flapped in the wind, Spanish horsemen shifted under their fatting banners. Edward tightened his grip on his musket. He wasn't afraid of dying, not really. He feared something colder, that his death might mean nothing at all. By nightfall, the plains of Talavera would drown in blood. By dawn, history would carve its first name into the man who would one day be known as Wellington. But before the glory came the horror. It was July 1809. The Peninsular War had turned the Iberian Peninsula into a furnace of rebellion, empire, and vengeance. Napoleon's armies ruled most of Spain. His brother, Joseph Bonaparte, sat uneasy on the Spanish throne, his crown bought with French bayonets. From Portugal, a new commander marched east, Sir Arthur Wellesley, not yet the Iron Duke, but already a man of iron discipline. His task was monumental, to drive the French from Spain and give a bleeding nation a breath of hope. Alongside him marched 20,000 British soldiers, weathered from years of campaigning. They were joined by 35,000 Spaniards under General Gregorio de la Cuesta, an alliance of necessity more than trust. Their goal was simple on paper, impossible in practice, to strike for Madrid. But the Spanish army was half-starved, ill-equipped, and held together by pride more than powder. Their officers distrusted Wellesley's British precision, the British distrusted Spanish courage. Between them lay the River Alberche, the last barrier before the open plains near Talavera. And somewhere beyond those ridges, Marshal Victor, Napoleon's hammer in the west, was marching to crush them. Edward, a mere corporal among thousands, had no idea of strategy or politics, but even he could feel it. The air was thick, as if the land itself was holding its breath. We tread a foreign field, he thought, our backs to the Tagus, and before us the wolves. By midsummer, the land west of Madrid groaned beneath the weight of marching armies. Clouds of dust hung over the hills, turning the sun into a pale coin of fire. The British expedition, 20,000 strong, moved like clockwork, lines of redcoats and gun teams, their coats dulled by sweat and powder. The Spanish host, proud but ragged, trudged beside them. Farmers turned soldiers, priests carrying muskets, boys too young to shave. They spoke different tongues, but the music of war was universal, boots thudding, sabers clinking, the clatter of empty canteens. Together, they numbered about 55,000 men with 60 guns, facing a French army of 46,000 veterans hardened by the Emperor's wars. Across the river, Marshal Victor's corps approached like a tide of steel. His banners glittered beneath the sun. His drummers kept time as if they commanded the heartbeat of the world. Wellesley's men took position on a ridge above the River Alberche, the Cerro de Medellin to the north, and Cerro de Cascajal to the south. Whoever held these heights would hold the battle itself. From the crumbling house of Casa de Salinas, Wellesley studied the landscape. His gaze moved from ridge to river, from vineyard to grove. Every feature was a calculation, every slope a possible grave. He saw the battlefield not as beauty, but as geometry. As twilight deepened, the French campfires flared across the horizon, an orange constellation under the darkening sky. The Allies answered with silence. In the British camp, men cleaned their muskets, sharpened their bayonets, and whispered half-hearted jokes. The Spanish sang hymns by firelight, their voices trembling more with fear than faith. Edward Markham sat polishing the brass of his musket until it gleamed faintly in the firelight. He glanced at the horizon, those flickering fires that marked the enemy's heart, and wondered if any of those men were doing the same. When midnight came, a sound rose from the French line, drums, slow and deliberate, echoing across the valley like a dare. Wellesley, standing on the ridge, listened. "They will attack at dawn," he said. And so began the vigil before Talavera, the calm before a storm that would rewrite Europe's memory of war. The morning rose hot and merciless. Mist burned away to reveal the French moving in force. Columns advanced through vineyards, cavalry scouts sweeping wide across the plain. The first clash came near Casa de Salinas, a brittle exchange of musket fire that cracked through the still air. Spanish cavalry surged forward, then broke. Panic spread like fire through dry grass. From his position on the ridge, Wellesley watched, face unmoved. To him it was confirmation. The Spanish line might hold, or it might vanish in smoke. He sent his orders quietly down the chain. "Steady the men, hold position, let them come." By late morning, the skirmishes thickened. The French pressed forward in waves, their light infantry creeping through orchards and walls, testing the British defenses. The air shimmered with heat and smoke. Gunfire rolled across the plain in ragged bursts. The ground was littered with the first of the day's dead. Up on Cerro de Medellin, British guns were dragged into place, iron monsters hauled by sweating men and teams of horses, each wheel cut deep into the dust. The ridge would become the hinge of the entire battle. From its crest, the British artillery could sweep the plain clean or die trying. Wellesley placed his Spanish allies to the left, nearer the town. Their lines looked impressive, but up close, officers wept in frustration at the disarray, men missing cartridges, ranks uneven, muskets rusted. Still they held their flags high. Pride is sometimes stronger than powder. By afternoon, the heat became suffocating. The French made feints, tested the British fire, and fell back. Both sides waited for the sun to die. Edward Markham stood among the 48th foot, watching the plain shimmer. His throat was dry. He felt the weight of silence, so heavy it pressed on the lungs. Then, as the sun dipped low, the French drums beat again. Their campfires flared once more, an entire army preparing for dawn. The British replied with stillness. Edward lay in the dust, his musket across his chest, staring into the dark. Somewhere beyond the ridge a horse neighed, a dog barked, and then came the final drumbeat, slow, echoing, deliberate. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "the valley will burn." The French came like a tide of gray and blue, their columns glittering with bayonets. The first guns fired, and the world dissolved into thunder. On the Cerro de Medellin, the British artillery roared. Grapeshot tore through ranks of French infantry. Smoke rolled down the slopes like fog from hell. Edward's battalion formed line. "Level muskets," came the cry. "Fire!" The volley hit with the sound of tearing cloth. Men fell where they stood. The living stepped over the dead to reload. The French pushed harder, their drummers beating them forward step by step up the slope. The British line wavered, reformed, fired again. "Hold the ridge," the officers shouted. "Hold, damn you!" The Spanish line on the left faltered under pressure, but the British discipline held like iron. Then came the flank attacks, French troops surging toward the vineyards of Pajar de Vergara, trying to turn the Allied side. For a moment chaos threatened. German auxiliaries broke, streaming backward through the lines. But the 48th foot, Edward's unit, stood their ground. They opened their ranks to let the retreating men pass, then closed them again, forming a wall of red and steel. At close range, the volleys became slaughter. A bayonet charge followed, a blur of smoke, sweat, and iron. Men screamed, locked in combat so close the gunfire gave way to the sound of steel on flesh. On the Allied right, the 23rd Light Dragoons charged the French squares, a magnificent but doomed assault. Horses tumbled, men vanished in musket fire, but their sacrifice bought Wellesley time. For hours the battle swayed like a pendulum. By noon, the Cerro de Medellin was a furnace of smoke and blood. Grass caught fire from cannon sparks. The wounded rolled and burned where they fell. At last the French began to falter. Their attacks lost shape. The British volleys broke their rhythm and the ridge held firm. When the French bugles sounded retreat, a roar went up from the Allied line, half victory, half exhaustion. Edward stood trembling, his musket hot in his hands. All around him the ridge was carpeted with bodies, some praying, some silent, some still. The French were gone, the field was theirs, but what a field to claim. By dusk the Battle of Talavera was over. The French had lost more than 7,000 men, the British and their allies over 5,000. The field was a charnel house. Men crawled among the dead, searching for water or mercy. The cries of the dying drifted through the olive trees long into the night. Wellesley walked the ridge in silence, his boots crunching over shattered muskets and torn colors. Victory was his, but the taste was bitter. Within days, news came. Marshal Soult was advancing from the north, threatening the British supply lines. The army, battered and half-starved, had no choice but to retreat back toward Portugal. The victory at Talavera would earn Wellesley a title, Viscount Wellington of Talavera, but it gave him no peace. He had won the ground, only to abandon it. Edward survived, though he would never again see the field as glory, only as a place where courage met futility and both bled out together. And now, if you walk the fields of Talavera, you'll find only quiet earth and whispering grass. No banners, no drums, just ghosts. Here, empire met endurance. Red coats and blue coats alike fed the soil. The French came for conquest, the British came for honor, the Spanish fought for their home, none left unchanged. In the smoke of Talavera, the modern world was being born, mechanized death, industrial discipline, and the terrible beauty of order in chaos. Wellington would rise to greatness, but Talavera was his first taste of what greatness costs. History remembers the glory, the medals, the titles, the maps. But the ghosts remember the cost. And somewhere in the dry wind that moves across the Alberch, they still march. Now, as the smoke of Talavera drifts into silence, the question lingers: what do we truly inherit from war? Is it glory or grief dressed in medals? If stories like this make you pause to see the faces behind the history, the echoes behind the empire, then walk a little further with us. There are countless forgotten fields still whispering beneath the soil of the Victorian age, waiting to be remembered. So if this journey moved you, subscribe, and share this story with others who still listen for history's heartbeat. Every click keeps these forgotten voices alive. Every view rekindles the light of memory in the dark corners of time.